Some people don't love gently. When they fall with their whole being, loving as if love were the only place where life finally feels real. They don't crave drama. They crave intensity, because their days have been quiet for too long. When love arrives and awakens strong emotions, it feels like salvation, not because of who the other person is, but because for the first time in a long while, they feel alive. People who love too hard are often described as weak, needy, or emotionally excessive. But psychology tells a different story. Loving deeply is not a defect of character. It is a capacity. It means the nervous system is highly responsive, capable of forming strong emotional bonds, and sensitive to connection. These people don't love carelessly. They love with attention, presence, and intensity. The problem does not lie in how much they feel, but in where those feelings are placed. When love becomes the primary channel through which life feels meaningful, emotional intensity starts carrying a weight it was never meant to bear. Love begins to function not as connection, but as compensation. Many people who love too hard grew up learning that emotions should be contained, postponed, or silenced. Over time, their inner world became quiet, controlled, and restrained. When love finally arrives and breaks through that restraint, the release feels overwhelming. Not because love itself is extreme, but because it is one of the few places where emotion is allowed to exist freely. Loving hard, then, is not immaturity. It is often the result of a heart that has been holding back for far too long. Before love becomes intense, life usually becomes quiet, not empty in appearance, but emotionally flat. Days repeat themselves with predictable routines, work, screens, sleep, without moments that truly engage the inner world. Nothing is dramatically wrong, yet nothing feels deeply right either. In this state, emotions are not expressed, explored, or challenged. They are managed. Life becomes functional, efficient, and controlled, but internally muted. Over time, the nervous system adapts to this low stimulation, craving something and anything that can disrupt the numbness. When a person enters during this phase and triggers strong feelings, the contrast is immediate and powerful. The sudden rise in emotional intensity feels like life returning after a long period of dormancy. Joy feels euphoric. Loss feels unbearable. Every interaction carries weight because it interrupts emotional silence. This is why love can feel overwhelming so quickly. It is not only attraction to another person, person, but a reaction to emotional deprivation. Love becomes the loudest signal in a life that has been too quiet, and the mind mistakes that volume for meaning. When emotions suddenly surge after a long period of emotional quiet, the mind searches for an explanation. It looks for a cause, a reason, a person to anchor that intensity to. Love becomes the most convenient answer. The heart says, "This must be love," because love is the only language available to explain such powerful feelings. But psychological intensity is not the same as emotional maturity. What feels like deep attachment is often the nervous system reacting to stimulation after deprivation. Dopamine, novelty, and emotional contrast combine to create a sensation that feels overwhelming, urgent, and consuming. The experience is real, but its meaning is often misunderstood. In these moments, people do not fall in love with who someone truly is. They fall in love with how alive they feel in that person's presence. Every message, every glance, every small interaction carries disproportionate weight because it feeds something that has been starved for a long time. Intensity creates the illusion of depth. The stronger the emotion, the more significant the connection appears. Yet intensity can exist without stability, understanding, or shared values. When life has been emotionally muted, even a spark can feel like a fire. The mistake is not feeling deeply. It is believing that depth of feeling automatically equals depth of love. Once intensity is labeled as love, the mind begins to project meaning onto the other person. unmet needs, unexpressed desires, and long suppressed emotions quietly attach themselves to someone who happened to awaken them. The other person becomes more than who they are. They become a symbol. They are no longer just a partner or interest. They become the source of motivation, emotional clarity, and inner movement. When they respond, life feels purposeful. When they withdraw, everything feels unstable. This is not because they control your emotions, but because your emotional life has been concentrated into a single external point. Projection creates dependency without intention. You begin to believe that the feelings you experience exist because of the other person, rather than recognizing them as capacities within yourself. Your sense of vitality, worth, and presence slowly shifts outward, tethered to their attention. Over time, the self becomes quieter while the relationship grows louder. The danger is subtle. You don't lose yourself all at once. You outsource yourself piece by piece. Love, in this form, stops being a meeting of two inner worlds and becomes a fragile structure built on emotional transfer rather than shared ground. As emotional energy continues to concentrate around one person, love quietly shifts from connection into structure. It becomes the primary pillar holding up the inner world. Daily emotions begin to rise and fall in response to messages, tone, timing, and attention. A delayed reply can trigger anxiety. A brief affirmation can restore calm. This is not obsession by choice. It is what happens when life lacks multiple sources of meaning. Without other stable anchors, purpose, creative expression, supportive relationships, or personal momentum, love absorbs everything. It becomes the place where identity, value, and emotional regulation are stored. Over time, this single-pillar structure grows fragile. The more weight love carries, the more dangerous instability becomes. Conflict feels catastrophic. Distance feels threatening. Silence feels unbearable. The relationship is no longer simply shared experience. It becomes emotional infrastructure. In this state, love stops being freely given. It becomes necessary. Not because the other person is exceptional, but because they are holding something too large for any one human being to hold alone. Love was never meant to carry the entire meaning of a life. When it does, collapse becomes not a possibility, but an eventual certainty. When a relationship built on emotional concentration ends, the pain feels disproportionate. The grief is not only about losing a person, it is about losing access to life itself. The world feels empty, colorless, and strangely silent. Motivation disappears. Direction collapses. This reaction is often misunderstood as proof of deep love, but psychologically, it reflects the sudden loss of an emotional system that was doing too much work. The relationship was not only companionship, it was stimulation, meaning, identity, and emotional regulation all at once. Without it, the inner world goes quiet again, sometimes even quieter than before. The nervous system, accustomed to intensity, experiences withdrawal. What follows is not just sadness, but disorientation, a sense that existence itself has lost coherence. The devastation is not a measure of how irreplaceable the other person was. It is a signal that too much of life had been entrusted to a single external source. The pain does not mean you loved wrong. It means love was asked to do what only a full, multi-anchored life can sustain. For many people who love too hard, love becomes more than connection. It becomes an escape from emotional stillness, from unanswered questions, from the discomfort of sitting alone with oneself. When attention is focused outward, the inner void feels quieter, at least temporarily. A relationship provides structure, someone to think about, someone to wait for, someone whose presence gives the day shape. This focus shields the mind from confronting deeper uncertainties about purpose, identity, or direction. Love fills time. It fills thought. It fills emotional space that would otherwise feel frighteningly open. The problem is not love itself, but the role it is asked to play. When love is used to avoid inner emptiness, it cannot remain healthy. It becomes charged with expectations it cannot meet. The relationship must constantly generate feeling to keep the void at bay. Calm becomes boring. Stability feels lifeless. Only intensity feels real. This pattern explains why some people are drawn repeatedly to emotionally volatile relationships. The chaos is not accidental. It is stimulating. It keeps emptiness from resurfacing. But the relief is temporary. Eventually, the same emptiness returns, often deeper than before, reminding us that no relationship can replace a life lived from the inside. A psychologically healthy life does not rest on a single source of meaning. It is supported by multiple anchors: purpose, creativity, contribution, connection, and growth. Love can be one of them, but it cannot be the only one. When meaning is distributed across different areas of life, emotional pressure eases. Work becomes a place of competence and progress. Interests create flow and presence. Community provides grounding and perspective. Personal growth offers continuity even when circumstances change. These anchors stabilize the inner world. In such a life, love no longer has to perform miracles. It does not need to rescue, validate, or animate existence. It can simply be shared. Desire becomes calmer. Attachment becomes more secure. Intensity softens into consistency. This shift does not dull emotion. It deepens it. Feelings become less urgent but more enduring. Love transforms from something you cling to into something you choose. Not because you fear losing yourself without it, but because you have already learned how to stand, breathe, and move within your own life. Love becomes a companion, not a lifeline. The emotions you experienced were never borrowed from another person. They were always yours. Love did not create your depth, your sensitivity, or your capacity to feel intensely. It revealed them. Somewhere along the way, those qualities were handed outward, mistaken as gifts given by someone else, rather than expressions of your own inner life. Reclaiming that life begins with a quiet shift in ownership. The joy you felt was your nervous system awakening. The pain you endured was proof of your emotional range. None of it disappears when a relationship ends. What disappears is the illusion that someone else was the source. This reclamation is not dramatic. It happens through small, deliberate acts, choosing presence over rumination, movement over paralysis, creation over waiting. Each action returns a fragment of vitality to its rightful place. As emotional energy redirects inward, self-trust slowly rebuilds. You no longer search for someone to animate your existence. You begin to generate momentum from within. Life regains texture, days regain weight. Love, when it appears again, meets a self that is awake, grounded, and already alive, not one searching to be restored. The most important transformation is subtle but decisive. It is the shift from needing love to feel alive, to choosing love from a place of fullness. In the first state, love is survival. In the second, it is expression. When love is needed, it carries fear. Fear of abandonment, fear of silence, fear of losing oneself again. Attachment tightens. Expectations grow heavy. Love becomes a contract written by absence. When love is chosen, it carries calm. There is space for individuality, difference, and time. Connection is no longer urgent because existence is no longer at stake. Two people meet not to fill a void, but to share what is already present. This does not make love weaker. It makes it honest. It allows intimacy without erasure, closeness without collapse. Love becomes part of life, not its proof. At this stage, the question is no longer, do you make me feel alive? It becomes, how do we grow while already being alive together?